Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week, I'm joined by hunky, hairy, huggable homos who love film to discuss film news and do a movie review. Sometimes it's a current movie, sometimes it's a classic movie, sometimes we blend them together, but this week, it is a current movie. And I don't know if you're going to be glad for this review or not, but we'll get there. We'll get there. With me, as usual, are my wonderful co-hosts, Jim Pugliafico. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brad, and hello, everyone.
Will Lindis is here with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey, guys. I'm so glad to be here with all of you and with all of our listeners today.
And they're glad, too. I just know it, Will. I know in their listener hearts, they're like, we hear Will. Yay.
Sunshine and happiness all around.
Kittens and rainbows. Hey, so we got a comment from someone who heard you say hey-oh or hey-ho last week, and he wants to be the ho in your hey-ho.
Oh, really? All right. Well, I will post the link separately for the application. There is a 3 to 6 month waiting period, but we will get back to you shortly.
Nice.
Will's whole list is pretty long.
That's pretty true. That's pretty true. My application was at least 7 months, so, you know. Anyway, well, guys, this week we're going to be reviewing Fantastic Four, and in honor of the movie, and I'm going to say even more exciting than the movie, am I revealing too much? We have some fantastic guest hosts with us this week. We are joined by some of our friends from the Comic Book Bears podcast. Stephen Mowry is here with us. Welcome, Stephen, or Steve, as he prefers. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you for having me back on. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, anytime. You were just here like 3 days ago, so...
I know. I felt like Ant-Man was just a couple weeks back.
Oh, guess what it was? Anyway, and we also have the very talented Matt Brossard with us. Matt, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the show.
Oh, well, thank you. We're a big fan of you and your artwork and the Comic Book Bears podcast and Steve Mowry and Bill Zanowitz, who cannot be with us, and everyone else from your show. We love your show, and it's always fun when we can do these crossover episodes. So thank you for joining us this week, guys. All right. So we have a large cast this week. There's 5 of us. And instead of doing movie news, which would take like an hour and a half with 5 people,
it takes an hour with 3 of us.
I know. We're going to ditch that segment. Sorry if you tuned in for movie news. Come back next week, maybe. And we're just going to launch right into our Fastantic Four.
Fast and Furious. Fast and Fantastic.
Wow. It's been a long day. No, we're going to launch into our review of Fantastic Four. But just to give you a little heads up, we talk about the movie spoiler-free for about the first 15 or 20 minutes. We give you a brief synopsis of what the film is about, whether we think it's worth checking out. And again, we protect your virginal innocence the best we can, unlike some other shows that are like, we won't spoil you at all, but how about that person that totally died at the end, and here's everything that happened. But no spoilers. I'm looking at you, insert name of popular movie podcast. Anyway. Here we go, our discussion of Fantastic Four. All right, so, gosh, Will, I think you're going to kick this off for us. I think you're a logical choice to do that. I don't even know where to start, but hopefully you do, because you're up.
All right. Well, let's start where I normally like to start with these things, which is the synopsis. After that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the movie spoiler-free, and then I'm going to talk about whether or not you should go see this in theaters. Synopsis. So we've got these 4 young adults who are transformed into their superheroic counterparts after inventing this device that allows them to travel to this strange and powerful new dimension. This new fantastic foursome has to join together to stop a familiar threat and save the Earth. So this is, of course, based on the long-running, since the '60s, Marvel comic books franchise, the Fantastic Four. Although this movie is produced by Fox Studios as opposed to Marvel Cinematic Universe, so anyone that's wondering about how this ties in with like the Avengers or some of the other movies that you may have seen, completely different movie universe. It's its own separate thing. Going into this, we've talked a lot on this show about the trailers themselves. We've had a lot of spirited discussions about the trailers themselves. Some of us, thinking that there might be some promise. Some of us withholding a little bit of our judgment because of some things that we did or did not see in those trailers. For me, unfortunately, the trailers themselves were a little dicey for me, and I can't even say that the film lived up to those expectations. This film is probably amongst my least favorite that I've seen this year, and I'll talk about why that is here in a moment. But broad overview stuff, there's some huge pacing issues. Once you get past some bad child actors at the beginning of the movie, there's this part of the movie that shows some promise, specifically the stuff where Jamie Bell is on screen, who I think was, for me, the standout of this movie. Terribly underutilized. We don't get to see enough of him. By the time we get to before the halfway point, the movie just drops into complete boredom. There were long stretches where not much exciting stuff was happening, and even when some of those exciting things start to come together, it's not enough payoff for me to have really enjoyed what I saw. The direction was limp. The script was riddled with plot holes. The CGI was bad in a lot of places. Even the actors, I felt like. We've got like Kate Mara, Miles Teller, and Michael B. Jordan, all actors who I have a ton of respect for, and none of them really delivered for me. And again, I don't necessarily say that it was bad acting. I think they probably didn't have much to work with. I don't think anyone's walking away from this movie without a black eye, unfortunately. Not only in this particular guy's view, but in, I think, the general populace's view. This movie is taking its beatings in the press, and some of that is bandwagonism, and that annoys me a little bit. But at the same time, this movie deserves a lot of its criticism. It commits the absolute worst movie sin possible, which is don't bore me. I would technically say that Pixels was a worse movie than this, but I would rather watch Pixels again than watch Fantastic Four again, because at least Pixels was an entertaining train wreck, whereas this, like, seriously, that would be like some sort of weird ball torture, like if I had to like sit through this piece of shit again.
Wow. Oh my God.
It was bad, but it was boring bad, which is the worst type of bad. When we get into spoilers, I'll talk a little bit more about why the characters suck, why I feel that this film didn't respect its source material, either from the characters, either from the storyline, or even the kind of the core of what the team is supposed to be. I'll talk about how much I hated the villain. We'll get to that in spoilers, but on the whole, the only thing I enjoyed about this were the brief moments early where Jamie Bell just got to be a normal dude. As soon as that goes away, I can't think of anything else that really did it for me with this movie. But so it's a hard pass for me. But maybe you guys liked it a little better. How did you guys feel?
So there's CBT and MBT, movie ball torture. Is that a thing?
Seriously, this is like, that scene in like the Bond movie where like, they hook up like the car battery to Bond and they're just like, we're gonna make you talk. It's like, we're gonna make you stay awake through this movie, Will. That's what this felt like, and that's a little harsh, I guess. But seriously, like, don't bore me. If you're a superhero action movie, there is no excuse to bore me.
Movie ball torture. Is that like a hashtag on Mobley?
I'm not saying it isn't.
Oh goodness! All right, so this was a not fun movie for Will. Matt, how about you? What did you think?
So I went into the theater with my hopes up. I am a big fan of Josh Trank. Like I was mentioning you guys over the weekend, I actually sat down and watched Chronicle again, just so that I could sort of refresh my memory about what it is about Josh's style that I like, what kind of material has he already covered, and it made me actually dislike Fantastic Four more after having seen it, after having watched them back to back. What few things I liked about Fantastic Four felt like they already had their roots in Chronicle, sort of the character development, the troubled childhood, the best friends like trying to like raise each other up, even just the whole story about like power corrupting and stuff like that. All of these things play out way more interestingly during Chronicle. So I sort of liked half of Fantastic Four, and then after watching Chronicle, disliked that same half just because it was sort of like the poor man's version of Chronicle. So I'm definitely not a fan of this movie. It had like just the meekest amount of entertainment value, and then that just like withered and died a slow death over the weekend.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, this movie only has like a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes, so Matt, I don't think you and Will are alone. I'm almost afraid to talk about how I feel because I feel like we're being so negative at this point, and I'm like I have to make things bright and cheery, and that's not happening.
Be yourself. Be yourself.
So here's the thing. So I struggled, guys. I admit it. I struggled. To get the original Fantastic Four movies like out of my head early on. I think over the last few months I did a really great job though. I recognized an opportunity. I took steps to address it. I reminded myself how much I love Miles Teller, Whiplash, phenomenal film. But I gotta say, going into this movie, even though I tried to keep my expectations as clear and clean as possible, I didn't enjoy it. And I couldn't help but think back to the earlier films. And not because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than those films. It was more like, oh my gosh, I wish I was watching those movies right now. Because this one was a snooze fest for me. In fact, I did fall asleep. Jim had to poke me a couple times. He's, trying to be helpful and, I felt embarrassed. I had a long day. We went to see it at night. Was it at night? I don't even remember.
No, it wasn't.
Was it the middle of the day?
It was the first showing of the day.
Oh, right. It was at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
No, it was like 11:50 in the afternoon.
No, it wasn't.
No, it was a matinee show.
No, it wasn't. We saw it Friday, sweetheart. We saw it Friday at like 5:30 or something.
Maybe.
Yeah. I fell asleep, but I do remember that.
Okay.
Anyway, so I like a lot of the actors in this film. Unfortunately, I don't think they had a lot of great stuff to work with. Maybe normally love Miles Teller. I enjoyed some of the stuff in this film from him more so before they got their superpowers than after. Then I really sort of detested pretty much everything he said and did. Kate Mara, who I really really liked from House of Cards, I felt was kind of wasted here. Also, it was super, super obvious, like, when they would switch from, like, what was shot originally to all the crap that they did in the reshoots because her hair is, like, totally different, the color's different, the length is different. I'm like, really? Like, you couldn't, I don't know, look at a picture of her from when you filmed it originally and maybe try to match it up a little bit? That felt a little lazy to me. The whole thing with Doctor Doom, oh my god, I can't wait to get to spoilers because I totally want to talk about that. And it looks like Will is making little Tyrannosaurus fists on camera as I say that. So
I'm ready for that too.
I'm sensing maybe we've got some alignment there. I mean, I wouldn't say don't go see it because here's the thing. We talk about the bandwagonism, right? We talked about that on our Pixels review a few weeks ago. I think if you jump on this movie and shit all over it without having seen it, I think that's a little suspect. I think you should see it and form your own opinion. But that said, I would spend as little money as possible to see it if you're going to form your opinion. So go on a matinee show, make a fake ID, and go on senior day and say you're 65 when you're 35. I'm actually not advocating breaking the law, so I'm going to take that back. Don't do that. Don't do that. But see a matinee show or something. But that's me. How about you, Steve? What do you think?
Well, again, I don't want to join in with the bandwagon of, shitting all over this movie, because really, it doesn't deserve all the hate that's been thrown at it. And I'm not even going to say since its premiere. I'm going to say all the hate that's been thrown at it since last year. I mean, when they started talking about the plot, when they started talking about casting, I mean, this thing has been dragged through the mud of, the Twitterverse and any forum online talking about it since it's been announced, basically. So, I'm not going to say that I hated it as much as Will and Matt did. And I do have to say I did enjoy about the first 60 minutes of this movie, because it reminded me of one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid, Explorers.
Yes, totally.
And, it had that sense of exploration, that sense of wonder, that sense of, hey, we're working towards a goal and it's going to be really cool. And I had that sense of anticipation that I think that they wanted to have the viewer build, as they, take a step into this other world, this other dimension. But, what happened sort of at the halfway or maybe 60% point just caused the movie to collapse. And, again, the acting was... They made do with what they had. What they had wasn't a lot, but Kate Mara was excellent. Michael B. Jordan didn't really like him in this, and I know a lot of people have been talking about how he's such a standout. I just didn't see any kind of character development. And again, I think when we talk in spoilers, we'll find out maybe some of the reasons for that. Miles Teller is always good, in my opinion, and Reg, I believe it's Reg Cathay, who played Dr. Storm, the father. He's always fascinating when he's on screen. Just the sound of his voice, that rumble, just really draws me in. But oh my God, there was so much promise, and I went in without the expectation of this is going to be an absolute disaster. I ignored a lot of the garbage reviews, and I was pleasantly surprised up until just past the halfway point. And then it went off the rails in a spectacular way that I would actually recommend that you see to believe, to understand exactly why people who don't like this movie don't like this movie. Again, the way it starts, I do have to say that if that was the movie that continued for the whole 100 minutes, I would recommend this. Again, see it cheaply, see it for the $5 show, see it for the first matinee or cheap night during the week. But man, oof. I've never been a Fantastic Four fan of the comics. The original movies were fun. All three of them were fun and cheesy, ridiculous sci-fi fantasy. This, I love the direction that he was going for, and then missed. It was too bad. Very lost opportunity, I think. So.
Right. Well, after all this glowing optimism, Jim, I think it's time to hear your thoughts. What did you think?
Yeah, I think I'm way more in line with Steve than I am with just about anybody else. So coming into this movie, like Steve, I had heard all the rumblings and the negative talk, and you're right, Will. We had talked about this, the trailers and stuff, and I couldn't understand, having never seen a Fantastic Four movie, having never read a Fantastic Four comic book, I was kind of a newbie to Fantastic Four, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be probably like a different spin on four superheroes, kind of like Avengers, but different, And I'm like, how much different could it be? And so I didn't understand where any of the hate was coming from, whether it was coming from the comic book, people who were in love with the comics and wanted to see it a certain way and didn't get that vibe in the trailers, or people who maybe liked the original movies and saw something different. So Brad's laughing, apparently.
No, it's not. It's not what you're saying.
What?
Can I stop you for a second?
Stop me.
Okay, we just got this from. I wonder if it's okay to show. I think it is. I think that's why he sent it. So, longtime fan of the show, Paul. Just
as long as we don't get kicked off the air before.
No, we won't. We won't. So Paul is enjoying, I think, some ice cream as well as the show.
That's amazing.
He is listening.
TV Creamy Creations, man.
He is listening very intently as I stare at his hairy nipple.
What flavor is that? I can't tell. Milk chocolate? Milk chocolate?
It's chocolate.
Cream.
It's chocolate.
It's nipple swirl.
All nice.
Fudge nipple.
Fudge. Oh my God, that's perfect. Fudge nipple.
Well, that sounds kind of gross, actually.
Anyway,
I don't
Jim,
know, it looks tasty to me.
go for it.
Anyway, where was I? Yeah, I didn't hate this movie. I had read some of the really bad reviews, the really shitty reviews going in. I'm like, holy crap! How bad can this movie really be? Like, I was going into the movie theater with first of all, I was rooting for this movie to be good, and then the reviews came out, and I'm like, well, how bad can this really be? This must be a real disaster. So I go in and I watched it, and I was like you, Steven, for the first hour or so, up until a certain point, and we can talk about maybe where that point is, I was kind of liking the vibe of this movie. And Matt is right. It's not quite the caliber of Chronicle, but it had very much the same vibe for me, kind of up until that point. And I kind of dug that. I'm like, for a comic book movie, this is a cool way to approach the origin story in a comic book movie, at least for me. And I know some people probably hated it for that. Even the fact that it was an origin story has drawn the ire of a lot of fans, I think. Like, why you got to do origin stories? We hate origin stories. And there are people out there who will say that. They'll say they didn't need an origin story. They should have just jumped into a plot or whatever. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I didn't hate this movie. This movie kind of kept me entertained all the way through. And I see its problems, believe me. There were some really terrible dialogue. You could tell this movie suffered from, man, I don't know. Nobody really knows what happened behind the scenes except the director and the studio. Mm-hmm. But there was some shit going on, and it was evident on the screen, and it's too bad because I think this movie was a missed opportunity. They had a great cast. I didn't quite like all the performances, but I'm not even going to put that on the actors because that could be direction, that could be writing, it could be a lot of things. I didn't care for Kate Mara at all. I thought actually she was probably the worst part of it for me. Steve, you mentioned character development. She got zero. She had absolutely zero. At least Michael B. Jordan's character got some. I mean, he was racing a car and getting in trouble, and we got a little bit on him, but nothing for some of the other characters, which was kind of weird. I didn't hate it. I'm not going to recommend anybody go spend their money on this, especially serious comic book fans. I think they're just going to fall in that camp of not liking this. I definitely like what they were trying, what I think they were trying to go for. There's some amazing, what's been called body horror kind of elements in this movie, and a very dark, I don't know, kind of not gritty. I hate that word, but just a real sinister vibe to some of the stuff that's going on, and we'll get into it in spoilers. Stuff that we don't see in comic book movies. First of all, I don't think I'm not going to go into spoilers, but it was very, for a while, it was very comic book movie, if you get my drift. And I was digging that because I don't like that cookie cutter mold, and it was trying to break the mold. And eventually, the part where I started to hate it was when they started getting to superhero stuff, and because they couldn't do that right. So I don't know. Again, a missed opportunity. I'm sad for it. I actually am hoping that they get another shot at a sequel, even though this movie is going to perform terribly. Who knows what the studio is going to do. I hope they get another shot with this cast, maybe with a different director and some writers, and make a good story out of it.
Well, given Josh Trank's tweets, I'd be surprised if he's coming
Oh,
back
it wouldn't
for
be
the rest
him. It won't be him.
Yeah.
It'd be
If
the-
Fox puts him anywhere near a camera again, I would be surprised.
Did you guys see his tweet before it was
I
removed?
did.
Oh yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
surprised.
so-
I'm surprised. I'm surprised it wasn't. I mean, that tweet is actually mild. I mean,
Yeah.
Let's read it for the audio listeners. Josh Trank put out this tweet that says, "A year ago, I had a fantastic version of this, and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's reality, though."
Did you guys feel like we were like on the evening news when I totally like put the tweet up on the screen? How awesome was that, right? Like, yeah.
and Will is Connie Chung.
Twitter is news now.
Oh, we have our Mowry. We have our
Yeah, we got Mowry.
It's only fitting we have our Connie Chung.
But that tweet was like that really spoke volumes too.
Yeah.
Like, how often do you see a director trash their own film on opening weekend? It doesn't happen. It's unfortunate because Josh Trank, much like a lot of the people in this film, there's so much potential. There's so much talent here, and Josh Trank is amongst that category for me. This is a talented dude who I feel as though, not just from the movie tanking, but because of kind of his reaction and kind of how he's handled himself on Twitter afterwards, I think he may have screwed over his career here. Like, it's going to be really risky for someone to put him behind the helm again, especially after kind of some of the rumors of what happened with him on the Star Wars set as well.
Right.
Hollywood loves a redemption story, so if if he can get one, then and make good on it, I think he'll be embraced again.
Well, what's really disappointing is that Josh Trank, he's a huge comic book fan. He's a big comic book guy. When he put out Chronicle, it was for me, I felt it was just a unique, wonderful, entry into independent superhero, independent sci-fi, an independent coming of age with superpower story. And afterwards, he is a huge comic book nerd. He was so excited to get into that world, and this was his entry. And unfortunately, it sounds like the conflict between the studio and him. But also, I kind of want to blame us, as in like the potential viewership of this movie, as being a part of that discussion or a part of that conversation or whatever that happened behind the scenes, as affecting what we finally got. And I think we could talk about that in spoilers.
Do you mean that? I mean, here's what I think may have happened. Again, who knows? I think he was taking it in kind of a new direction, as he did with Chronicle, and I think if left to him, he would have totally bought into that and given us that product. Now, whether it would have been better than what we got, who knows? I don't know. I'm not saying it would have been, but it would have been at least something that he could, wrap his arms around and say, hey, this is what But I got the sense that at some point somebody got cold feet.
Yeah.
Whether it was the backlash from trailers or that may have been too late in the process, but just the buzz of like, oh, how this movie's gonna suck and blah 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 blah, and the studio said, hey, this is way out of our comfort zone. We need you, Josh, to make these changes, and that's where the friction all came in.
So it's the studio's fault that this movie tranked?
Nope.
Nope.
No, it's just. I think it's just a big, kind of a letdown on everybody's part involved.
Yeah. I have a feeling that if Trank was a more established director with a lot more pedigree behind him, he probably could have stood his ground and made the movie that he wanted to make. And again, as Jim said, it may have been crap.
It may have sucked. Yeah.
It may have been horrible, but it would have been unique and it would have been his. And I think what we saw was some of that.
A Frankenstein.
Yeah, we did. We saw a Frankenstein. We saw some of it, and then we saw the, the potential viewer backlash before a movie even existed. Like before it even was completed and seen, we had people talking about how terrible it was and the decisions and the choices and the direction and all this stuff. And I totally agree. I think the studio got cold feet. They stepped in. They started making decisions based on You know, and we hear it all the time in focus groups, and that's usually when a film's already been completed. They'll make changes based on focus groups. This happened before there were even focus groups, so it looked to me like the studio tried to fix it the way that they thought they should. They changed things just enough to make it
a mess.
Standard? Yeah, it made it a mess, and it made it like like Brad said, it made, Brad and Will both said it. It made it boring at parts, and that is the biggest sin when it comes to a superhero movie. These are movies built on action and excitement, and if you fall asleep, ugh.
And it's so weird. It's so weird because normally I'm like, don't bore us, get to the chorus, right? Like, give me the fun action stuff. Give me the superpowers. Give me the spectacle.
And the action was the worst part.
Right. And that's the worst part of the movie. I liked the build-up, too. I liked kind of that explorer-y feel, right?
Yeah. Well, and I've heard the complaint that, it's this long before we see any superpowers in this movie.
Who cares?
And it's too. And I said I don't buy into that. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm fine with how long it takes to get there. What I'm not fine with is the movie totally becoming a snooze fest when it does.
And I do buy into it for that reason. Like, the problem with this particular genre of movie is that there is an expectation. You're gonna play to certain crowds, and when you get to it, you either need to have a long build-up with an explosive finale. Put your sex innuendo there. Just go for it.
Right.
Or you need to have it sprinkled all throughout. But what you can't do is have kind of a teaser of something kind of somewhat interesting that's a little off the rails but has promise, and then just kind of piff out at the end. Like, that was what bothered me so much about this movie. Is much like The Thing himself, this movie lacked balls. It lacked the confidence.
He had stones, though. He had stones.
This movie lacked.
He had big stones.
This movie lacked the confidence to do any of the things that it wanted to do. Like you mentioned body horror earlier. If it had gone into like full body horror realm, if this had been a really dark, maybe not dark, maybe disturbing, if it had really played off of that, I would have been down for it. If it had reeled back and said, hey, this is going to be a superhero movie, so let's just full bore and go into it. We talk about the Marvel formula here, but one of the things they at least know how to do is put colorful things on screen that are fun and exciting and interesting, kind of frame to frame. That's what this movie did not know how to do. It did not commit to any of the things that it wanted to do. And we can blame, director, we don't know. The producer, we don't know. The end result is somewhere. The end result is a movie that wanted to be a lot of different things, and as a result of trying to do all of those things, it was none of them. That's why I hated it so much.
Yeah. And you know what? Talking about the body horror, if they had gone full-on fucking Cronenberg, I would have been on board the entire way. But unfortunately, and we'll talk about it in spoilers, it just felt... After a certain part of the movie, anything that came after that just felt like it was from a different movie that they decided to staple onto this one just to try and make it end.
Now, I've got a question for Matt, because Steve, I know you mentioned you weren't as big a Fantastic Four fan by comparison. I come from the tech category of, I grew up more X-Men, but Fantastic Four was my sidekick. Like, if I wasn't reading X-Men, Fantastic Four was my backup. Matt, where do you fall? Like, where was Fantastic Four in your comic book pantheon?
So I didn't have very many early issues of Fantastic Four. Like when I was a kid, I had a couple of issues where they had the Thing when he had like the jagged rocks. And they had just stopped being the weird Fantastic Four with Wolverine and Ghost Rider and Spider-Man and the Hulk. And then missed a lot of issues and caught like a crossover here and there. It wasn't until about, let's see, how old is this comic? It wasn't until I started reading Mark Millar's run for Fantastic Four that I actually considered it to be like one of the royal family for Marvel Comics. And Mark Millar does a fantastic job of showing why we need a Fantastic Four in the Marvel Universe. They're sort of like these intrepid explorers. They also introduce major problems into the universe, like killer celestials and things like that only the Fantastic Four can get rid of. And then after that run, there was another really good run by Jonathan Hickman, and Jonathan Hickman took all of these seeds laid by Mark Miller and ran with it. So what happens if Reed Richards gets out of control, and Doctor Doom starts messing with the time stream, and their kids from the future come into the past and have all these solutions that the parents in the present don't want to go with. It's wild and crazy, and it's a whole bunch of different sci-fi genres all at once. So the comic books won me over in recent years because I think they're really ambitious up until the point when Marvel Comics seems to have this strife going on with 20th Century Fox, and then the comics all sort of deteriorate after that. They pull all the good teams off of it. They've been tinkering with canceling it over and over for the last couple of years, and so I think there's people like me that are super ready for another really awesome Fantastic Four comic, and we're not going to get it anytime soon.
So I do have a question about that, because I'm what you call a casual comic person, I guess, and I read mostly DC stuff. So, after this movie, I posted on Facebook, and I'm like, okay, not a fan. I guess I'm maybe done with this franchise in movie form. And some guys posted, I guess, the comic was canceled. Is that true? Or did I misread that?
Yeah, so there was an article on Bleeding Cool about what's going on with that. Some people think that it's because of the 20th Century Fox rights dispute. Some people think that they're kind of tucking it into Secret Wars, because Secret Wars is as a byproduct, it's canceling everything. So it looks like you have something to add there, Will.
Oh no, just agreeing with you. It's hard to really figure out why it is that the title is going away. Part of it has to do with the Fox thing. Part of it has to do with the crossover going right now. But at least the characters aren't just getting completely thrown away. I know the Thing is going to be in the new Guardians of the Galaxy comic.
Which looks fun.
Which looks fun, and it's a smart way for them to say, hey, here's a popular character in a comic book based on that movie you guys like. So let's just look at this now. Let's look over here.
Well, there's the other side of it, too, that's purely a money grab. I mean, the fact is Fantastic Four has not been selling well over the past couple of years. And so if you're going to support a comic book, and it honestly, it did have one spin-off. So you have the Avengers that have 10 different tie-in books going at once, and all of them, they have somewhat okay sales, but they all tie in together. Fantastic Four had Fantastic Four. And FF, which was very much placed as an indie book. It was, Matt Fraction and Mike Allred, and then it became all family Allred, and it very niche. And Fantastic Four itself, the story went bleh. Nobody really liked it. Well, some people did, but nobody really liked it. It just kind of petered out, and there were more complaints about the book and more people dropping it. So I think the Fantastic Four is one of those franchises in comic books that comes and goes, and it works really well when it, during certain crossovers. Secret Wars, the Fantastic Four are huge players in this giant world-ending crossover. Each one of the characters are very important, but whether they could support a book, well, we've seen over the past couple of years they can't.
So, as I understand it, and going back to the origin of the comics, is the Fantastic Four is very much a science-driven team, and it sounds like they debuted during the 60s, which was kind of like the golden age of modern science, right? I mean, we put men on the moon. Space exploration was huge. I remember being way into sciencey shit when I was, very, very small. And it seems like that kind of pioneering spirit has kind of died off a little bit. We don't even have a strong NASA anymore. I don't know. It's just maybe it's tied in with that. Maybe the decline of Fantastic Four is kind of died out because of that whole science vibe has kind of waned a little bit.
Maybe. Maybe it's just maybe it's just stretched on for so long that it just becomes this thing, right, that flames out and becomes practically invisible.
But then flames back on.
Nice, Brad.
So I want to add to that because in this run specifically, the one thing that got me to buy multiple trades of this comic was that the writer recognized the fact that right now we have these high science concepts that like we're ready to buy into. The idea of like what would you do if the world was gonna die in one generation? Like how would you solve that problem? And Reed Richards designs like a substitute Earth and tries to grow it hyper fast. And there's other stuff like all the time travel and weird cloning stuff, and like the writer recognizes the fact that we think that like because the atomic age is kind of over, there's no more like sci-fi concepts to explore, and he's like, no, I could go in 10 different directions with this and do all this crazy sci-fi that hasn't been done in comics yet, and the Fantastic Four are gonna like be the people that dare to go into these like weird highbrow like science topics, and that's what I was looking for in this movie. Like it started there when they started talking about the flying car and the transporter. I thought, okay, if we're starting with quantum physics, this is gonna get crazy by the end, and I was sad about that. It didn't go there.
Went nowhere.
Fantastic Four really has two things that I think are the core essence, whether we're talking comics, the cartoons, or I guess what a lot of comic book fans would probably be looking for in these movies. One of them is that hard, weird science exploration, and I'm not talking about just like going off and exploring, but like going into these weird concepts. Like this is the place where you can do like time travel or alternate dimensions and all of that. And we got to see a little bit of it, but we didn't quite do enough with it. The other thing is, again, another product of kind of the early 60s when this came from. They are a very strong family unit. Like that's what the Fantastic Four kind of was built up around. You've got this all-American, brilliant, charming at first scientist guy and his beautiful arm candy wife. Her reckless but lovable brother, and then their also reckless but lovable friend, and the four of them become this like really tight family. Like all of them are bonded together, and the best Fantastic Four moments are when you get to play off of that interplay. And another of my big concerns with this movie is that there was not enough of that. Like there are, I was actually kind of tracking some of the interactions, and you have a couple of these pairs that make sense. Reed and Ben are our friends. Sue and Johnny are brother and sister. You have this very, very like tenuous bond between Reed and Sue that comes apart in just like a handful of scenes. You have no interactions except for one sequence at the very end between Sue and Ben, between Johnny and Ben. So you don't have these interactions. You don't have this interplay. They're supposed to come together and be this unit that is stronger than the sum of all of its parts. And instead, it's just like, hey, you guys all have powers. Point your powers in the same direction and let's go. That was very problematic for me. And even during the trailers themselves, like I think in our previous discussions, I've said like the one thing I couldn't really say that I loved about the trailers is I didn't get a sense of like how they interact and how they bond. And maybe when I see the movie, that will get cleared up for me. But I was extremely disappointed in the way the characters interacted with one another.
So I think that's a great call out, and I think that's maybe a good segue into our spoiler section, because I think we're sort of corralling ourselves and making it more difficult than it needs to be to talk about some of these things. Are we collectively good with moving into spoilers?
Yes.
Can't spoil it any more than it already is. Oh, spoilers as in facts about the movie. Yes, let's do it.
All right. Spoilers are officially fair game as of about 3 seconds from now. If you value your virginal state, if you've not seen this movie, do not continue listening. But if you don't care, keep listening. We love to have you anyway. So, Will, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So two main things stick out at me in that regard that almost seem like they would be easily fixable. But for whatever reason, I don't know if this was like a scriptwriter choice or what, but so two things. One, Ben Grimm just sort of like shows up, like Reed like calls him and he's like, "Hey buddy, haven't seen you for like 35 minutes. You don't know any of these people, but come drink with us and go to this other dimension." oh, okay, be right there. And so, like,
Yeah, very weird.
these other people, he's not friends with these people at all, right? But he's part of this, I don't know. And then
For
the
all
other
we know,
thing,
he doesn't even know what Reed's been doing for the
right,
last...
right. And then the other thing is Sue doesn't even go with them. She doesn't even go with them to the other fucking dimension, right? How does she get her powers? Oh, she gets hit by an energy wave when they all return. I'm like, how is that forming this team and this cohesive experience? It made no sense to me.
I could go super feminist on that fact too. The fact that the only female on the team is the one who isn't invited along.
I thought that was really weird. Like,
yeah, I did too.
Agency and the whole thing.
It's like she's totally invisible to the rest of the cast.
I know, right?
And I understand they had to create the villain, so they had to bring him along. But why does the portal machine have to be 4? Why can't it be 5?
Well, and see, that's the thing. I loved, and this is the probably the most frustrating part of it. I love the new take on what what Doctor Doom could be. Like, you could see it in parts, what they tried to do. He's clearly a hacker. You see it in his laboratory that he's completely automated and he controls with his eyes. In that small part. And he's the super brilliant, very tortured, just
he plays
off
games.
guy.
We know that.
Yeah, he plays games. That he's very interested in in the world. There's a connection with Sue that they only briefly mention for about 30 seconds. Where is Sue from? She's from Kosovo. Where is he from? Latveria, potentially around the Balkans. They have that kind of built-in Eastern European conflict. They had that possibly maybe romantic connection that he felt towards her that she didn't feel towards him. That's from the comics, that's canon. But there's all these things that they put in that first sequence of the movie, and the first half of the movie, to explain who these people are and how they interact with each other, except for Ben, poor Ben. And Doctor Doom, I think, was probably the most potentially interesting character that they were just like, well, people didn't like that he wasn't Victor Von Doom, so we got to reshoot those scenes and cut out some character development and change who he is and his background and his history. So he's just like some guy who's a prince, maybe. I don't know. He lives in a warehouse. Whatever.
No, I got the sense he was a former protege of.
He was. Yeah, I mean
of the dude, and who kind of went, on a not desirable path.
Yeah.
The thing I struggled with is, I swear to God, it took me a while to figure out. Oh, the Kate Mara character is actually adopted sister of the Michael B. Jordan character. I'm like, that. It took me forever to figure that out. Like, they are okay, I got it.
Well, I mean, Dr. Storm says when he introduces them, or when he introduces himself and Sue at the beginning at the science fair, he said, "Hi, I'm Dr. Storm, and this is my daughter." There's that little moment where it focuses on Miles Teller. He looks at her, he looks at him, and he's like, "Oh, okay, hi." It's just sort of like, that's all we need to know.
Processing.
Yes, he's an interracial, he's a black father with a white daughter. Cool, that's it. And then they mentioned later on, she's adopted. Cool, that's it.
We didn't even know he had another son, did we?
Yeah, I know. And then randomly, Johnny has this big drag racing section that makes no sense in explaining. It's like a weird introduction.
To your point about how they're supposed to be about family and stuff. Yeah. And I understand the construct of the family was very sketchily created, but there was no connection at all between the adopted brother and sister. None whatsoever.
Oh, zero family chemistry.
For me, yeah.
And that's what's so sad is that I think that, and again I'm just throwing my interpretation out there, that Josh Trank wanted a film where you have 4 young people that don't really have biology in common that can come together and become a family. That, here's Johnny and Sue Storm, that in the comics they're a family, like, they grew up together kind of thing, and they're related by blood. In this case, they're not related by blood, even though they grew up together. They had very different, ways of being. Sue is the, daddy's girl. She's living up to her potential, and Johnny's off racing cars and getting into accidents and being a delinquent, and sort of, also has a potential and eventually gets pulled back in. Ben is supposed to be this lovable oaf who's kind of out of his element, but they don't even let him come into the family until just sort of later on, like, hey, buddy, you want to go to another dimension? Cool, it is kind of disappointing, and I think a lot of that happened around reshoots. I think a lot of that was clipped. You can tell that there are certain scenes that are completely missing. Oh, kitty.
Totally.
There's a kitty cat.
There's a
Kitty cat.
Whee! But you can totally tell that there were things cut out that probably would have explained these characters a bit more alone, but also, together interacting. And I think that those, you could feel their lack. You could feel that they were missing from this film, whether they just made it onto a script and never made it filmed, or whether they were filmed and just ended up on the cutting room floor.
So along that vein, do you think there was supposed to be something more with the Ben Grimm character, like coming from the abusive family, like the whole it's clobbering time his brother said when he beat the shit out of him? But was that maybe
lots of cuts? There was a list of scenes that were cut and traces of it. Yeah, because the trailer contains a whole bunch of footage that doesn't appear in the film. Yeah. There's an entire fight scene with the Thing that's missing.
Yeah, when he drops out of the plane and lands on a Humvee.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Never even in the movie.
There's 2 scenes with the Torch where he's got powers that don't appear in the film.
There's a scene without powers that doesn't appear in the film where he's working on his car in a garage and. There's other things.
There's the Mole Man storyline. Yeah. So there's I don't know for sure how much of it was shot, but from the list that was posted on, I think it was Bleeding Cool had a list of the traces of it. It seems like there was all sorts of stuff being juggled in the air that never really came to fruition. I mean, there's a whole Fantastic Car thing that's seen in the background of one of the unfinished shots, with green screen and stuff. So who knows what was going on there, flying car. So
that would have been amazing for me, because again, I want that weird science in my Fantastic Four in some way, shape, or form. And if they're not going to go the full body horror route, then give me a flying car. Give me that. Yeah. Also, introducing the Thing. Every time we say the Thing, I'm immediately reminded that the character's name is the Thing, and then I stop and pause, and it's awkward. But the thing that could have been a little bit more interesting about the Ben Grimm character is if they had not just shifted him back home for large portions early on. Maybe the fix on that, and again, only going off of the finished product, maybe the fix on that is all right, Reed, you can come to this school. All right, great, but this guy needs to come with me. You know what? We want your intellect here. Why doesn't he come along too? Because then you get him interacting with Doom. You get him interacting with Johnny. You get him interacting with Sue. The other thing I would change is I would make Sue less of an ice queen. She was very cold, very stiff through a lot of the movie. It was the Portishead. That was actually, I guess, the other thing.
Portishead will do that to you.
But
why couldn't it be Earth, Wind, and Fire?
I mean, she could have been listening to Tori Amos and been really sad but emotional and interesting.
Fire would have been perfect. At least that would have been a joke, oh, I get it, because they're elemental.
Would have made her head explode.
But if he had been a little bit of a warmer character, those moments with Reed and those moments with Johnny would have felt more. There would have been more chemistry. I would have understood why she was connected to those characters.
And that's why I say easily fixable, right? Because if we could have Johnny Storm show up because he can weld shit, right? Then why can't Ben Grimm be there in an official capacity? You know what I mean? It just seems like such a curious choice to me to take someone and relegate them out of the whole thing for 35 fucking minutes, right? And then finally bring him back in. And I just think it's a lot for us to sort of believe that, this group is just going to accept him and be get in our interdimensional transporter machine. Let's drink some beers and go to another dimension, dude.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting too, and this is where the gap happened for me. That 1 year later, once that appeared on screen, it was fuck that other movie. Here, you want to watch this now, right? No, it was. I mean, they were going in that direction. Yes, Sue was kind of out of the picture, and there were all these character, missteps. But up to that point, when Reed's lying there in that examination table with his arms and legs stretched out, and Johnny's covered in fire, like
screaming and
terrified and screaming, and when Sue's just invisible, and Ben is like crying out for help. That is an interesting thing. That's an interesting direction. I wanted to see more of that. In some horror, I guess,
misery porn,
grotesque sort of way. Like I really liked that because honestly, Fantastic Four, if you take out the sunny like 1960s introduction of these people, that must have been horrifying. Like you come back from space, your suits are all burned up, and oh Sue, let me get you for oh my God, my arm is 100 feet long, or like Sue disappears, or the Thing is there. Where's my junk? Well, now we know the question. We know the answer to that question. He doesn't have any junk anymore. Like all these horrible things that have happened. This movie did not shy away from showing how terrifying and disconcerting that is when that first happens.
Except 2 seconds later.
Yeah, exactly. 1 year later,
she's all like, "Look at me floating in my Glenda bubble."
Exactly. Yeah, like 1 year later, we're all cool with this shit. It's awesome.
So I have to say that special effect of her floating looks so much more horrible than the exact same special effect in Chronicle. Like when they are floating for the first time and trying their powers, they're just wearing plain clothes and they're at like a garbage dump or something, and they're just, it's so interesting and realistic looking. And they show us that shot in Fantastic Four that looks like video game footage with her and her like glowing power sphere thing, and it looks like it's not even like detailed enough to be in a big budget film. And I was really sad because I realized all of the exploration of their powers was gonna just not be, it wasn't gonna be the direction that they were suggesting, where they were gonna do things all ultra realistically. It was just gonna be a whole lot of that.
Yeah,
like, look how fun it is now that Johnny can turn his fire on and off. Isn't that cool? Look, he can shoot fire. And not, I'm on fire all the time. How do I help this? Terrifying. And actually, here's another thing, and I noticed that nobody mentioned this character yet, but Dr. Henry Allen.
Is that the Tim Blake Nelson character?
Yes. And in the first half of the movie, this is a guy who's kind of aloof. You understand his position. He's not chewing gum, and he just kind of looks like he's a smarmy guy. Yeah, you don't know if you can trust him or whatever. He's not evil. 1 year later hits, this guy is chewing gum like a cow, like dealing human arms and talking about taking over the world. What the fuck? Who is this guy? Where did he come from? Like, who is this guy? Did they have two characters and they were just like, let's put them together, no one will notice?
He's not.
He was supposed to be the mole man.
Well, yeah, I heard that. I don't know. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but why would he have such a huge character change
from
the first half to the second half?
Here's the thing. Think about it logically. Before, he didn't live in a world where people could fucking stretch their penis out a mile and a half and make him feel super jealous. Right? Now he does.
He compensates by chewing gum loudly and violently.
He's like, look, I can stretch too.
Well, that's the thing. Like, in every scene after that 1 year later, he's chewing. And it's grating. I don't want to watch the movie.
Are you suggesting that he was chewing a piece of reed?
Oh my god! That would have made a better movie.
Now it's even more body horror.
Sriracha flavored reed.
Jim, what have you
been trying to get something out for like 10 minutes? I'm sorry. What you got?
Oh no, I liked Tim Blake Nelson as an actor all the way back to oh god, now I can't even think of the movie. The one with George Clooney singing bluegrass.
Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh, Brother, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I liked, but I just don't think that was a terribly miscast, I think, role for him in this movie.
Yeah.
The other thing I hated was, okay, they come back from, and this is where the movie kind of flipped for me.
Mm-hmm.
They come back from this horrifying experience. They saw their friend supposedly die on this alternate dimension place, and they come back. They're dealing with all these horrific things that are going on with their bodies, and then we get the 1 year later thing. I think it was after that, and Tim Blake Nelson is standing in front of like a press corps talking about, and he has to go through everybody's powers, like, oh, and so has the ability of fire, and we created these suits, and he has to do exposition like, which we didn't even need. And this whole thing about, I wish they would drop this trope, and I don't know where it comes from and why they keep going to it, of the military always having to weaponize every fucking superpower, every supervillain, superhero there is. It didn't even need to be in this movie. Did not need the military at all.
It could have been serve any purpose.
It could have been just the scientists, their deformations or whatever you want to call them, and the travel to the other universe, and the villain that they set up. That's what it could have been, but they had to put this, we're developing these weapons for, to fight in our wars and blah, blah, blah. It's like so fucking boring. I hate it.
Totally. I kept expecting Vincent D'Onofrio to show up and be like, let's put the stretchy guy on the back of a raptor, guys.
What if we set the raptors on fire?
They did it in that movie too, and they didn't have to do it. It's
invisible flaming raptors.
And that's the thing. Like in both Jurassic World and here in Fantastic Four, it's almost like a B plot. Like if that were like the core plot, people versus military institution. Okay, I get it. But in both of these storylines, it's heroes versus the main villain, and then also the military's fucking around doing stuff, and all it does is detract from more important things. And a lot of that is because of the 1 year gap. The 1 year gap was, of course, problematic for the Dr. Allen character. It was also problematic for Thing and for Human Torch for me. It destroyed those two characters in terms of this movie for me. Both of them, like 1 year later, they're like, the Things, like during that year, it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna go kill a bunch of things.
I'm still depressed.
He had 42 confirmed kills. So, and I get maybe that part of it's because, he's changed, he's different now, and he thinks this is all he's got. I get a little bit of that. We didn't get to see that transformation. Because of the 1 year gap, he just went from state A to state B without us getting to see the transition. Even more problematic, though, was Johnny, who we find out that he can turn the powers on and off. He loves his powers. And what's his storyline there? I want to try out and do this thing, too, because I want to rack up a bunch of kills as well, which was not grounded in anything that we had seen from that character up till then. This was a guy who was reckless. This is the guy that said fuck it to the roles. He did things his own way, and now he's just like, I've got power, so I want to work for the military and blow stuff up. It made no sense. It was like someone who had never read the Fantastic Four got a hold of that script and was responsible for writing that particular...
and if you want to talk about bad video game... effects. I mean, there's several of them in this movie, but the one that stood out for me was when they showed his power chasing the drone.
That was the worst for me.
Oh my god, that was awful. Like it showed him flying through the sky on fire and hitting the drone. I'm like, that was ridiculously bad.
What's the point of that? And another sin too was like having this whole redoing Ed Norton in Incredible Hulk, off in the jungles of Central America or South America or something. He's building, a suit to contain his stretching abilities. He's building a second transporter that, it just kind of disappears. Like
he wanted to fix.
Right.
He wanted to go back. He thought he could go back, and if he did, he could figure out a way to fix his friends.
Exactly, and there's all these things that were happening with Reed that we only get hinted at. And then Thing shows up and he's like, I hate you. Oh, but I'm okay. And then that's it. That's
Wait, can we talk about how they find Reed? Because that is a crime. I mean, when they try to make her look smart by sitting in front of a bunch of maps and just staring while music plays, I was like, that doesn't demonstrate to us that she is a capable person.
She can listen to music and discern patterns. It's crazy. Wow.
Like some of the Beautiful Mind bullshit.
I have a problem with the fact that 3 of the characters in this are supposed to be scientists, and they go to another dimension, and their first instinct is to go poke the energy spewing out of the ground with their hand.
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking, like, okay, fine, it's not Star Trek, there's no prime directive or anything, but I think there should still be some sense of like responsible scientific exploration going on, some sense of like controlled conditions.
Yeah,
And they're
well,
like, let's go have a bath in the magma.
Well, and here's the other thing, right? Here's the other thing. So they're drunk, right? And they're like, oh, well, let's be quick about it. But this pool of, like, glowing goo is, like, 10 fucking miles away, climbing way down. Like, yeah, you're really going to be quick taking, like, a 3-day hike to the glowy pool.
Wouldn't that have been more interesting if while they're there in that other dimension, they're still visibly drunk and they're just like, woo! And like, I would buy that a lot more. Like, you know, this is why shit went bad, is because they were drunk. But going back to that scene you were saying, like, about the very laughable, like, Sue figuring out where Reed was at, the other thing that I hated about that, and the thing that, like, I chortled the theater, and I hate being the guy that does that. It's the only time I did that in the movie. I restrained myself. But as she's looking through everything, and then she sees the one password that says Captain Nemo, and she recalls back, like, earlier, like, a year earlier, where Reed was like, hey, have you ever read this one book? Yeah, I've read it. It's about Captain Nemo. And that's like... Do you make your username just question for you guys? Is the username for your different like online profiles based off that one book you one time randomly showed some girl in a library? Chances are it isn't. I fucking hated that. It was so obvious, and it was so
okay.
It was poorly written.
I'm gonna take umbrage with that because here's the thing, and I think we lost Jim. Oh my gosh.
We did.
Where did Jim go? Where did Jim?
He was channeling Stu. He was
Wait, I'll find him.
Yeah, Matt, look for him. Look at the map real quick. Oh,
Put on
Wi-Fi
support
map.
his head.
There you go. So here's my thing. So like, if you want to be flirty and you want to get to know someone you maybe have a crush on, maybe you take something that you really love and try and find out if they love it too, right? He had all these books on fucking quantum theory and everything else, and that book just happens to be with him. He happens to grab that one book off the shelf, right? Maybe as a shy nerd guy, that was his attempt, right, to start a conversation with her. So maybe that would make sense that maybe his screen name or something is tied in. But I agree, it does seem a little convenient, I guess.
Movie magic.
But of all the things this movie does wrong, that's not like the one that I'm like, I don't believe that could happen.
It wasn't the absolute like worst thing about the movie, but it was the one that was just like, it was the most unnecessarily dumb thing. Like, it was like they act. Everything else that we've talked about were just things like, oh, if they had changed this, if they'd done that. If they had just completely left out that fucking username, it would not have hurt anything. If she had just been like, you know what, I'm looking at this signal over here, and it looks like, based on the pattern of this, he's probably over here. Scene's done, let's go find Reed. That would have been enough. But then she looks at the screen and sees that username and does that. To me, that was just like unnecessarily and arbitrarily just kind of tacked in. Like, some writer was just like super fucking pleased with themselves for that, like, that moment. Like, give me the fucking Oscar now. Look at that. I referenced the thing that happened earlier. I am a writing god.
Well, actually, more to the point, it was probably 3 different people patting themselves on the back at the same time, because this writer room must have been like, they must have had to pull tables together, because I can't believe that 1 or 2 people were responsible for this Frankenstein mess. You know, an interesting thing, and I kind of want to go back to the body horror, because I really liked that aspect. And when they brought Dr. Doom back, when they found him in the alternate on that Planet Zero, it's not, it's Planet Zero, not the negative zone. Okay, whatever. They bring him back. He looks cooler than he did in the Jessica Alba Fantastic Four movie.
Whoa.
I mean,
I'm not with you on that one.
Before his eyes turned green, before they turned green, I think they were. He looked. It made sense why he looked the way he did. Like, why the suit was fused to him. Everything was fused to his face and his skin. He looked bizarrely mutated. That was kind of cool. The giant, the giant hoodie, whatever. But at that point, it was cool, and then he had to turn his eyes green and say, I must destroy this world, for no apparent reason, and started blowing up people's heads. That was a totally different movie. Like, we're talking about, like, we're Frankenstein different movies together. This is another movie. This is scanners. All of a sudden it became scanners. He's blowing people's heads up. Everyone's, nobody's safe. Everyone's just running around going, and he's walking around. I didn't know what was happening in that moment where the four are hearing the alarms, coming together. Now we're going to save the world because that's Victor Von Doom and he's killing people, and that's the beginning of the end. I mean that's just where any hope of saving this movie was completely gone.
He's stronger than any one of us. But he's not stronger than all of us.
Actually, I think he could be, because he could just blow up all of your heads.
Well, here's the thing. This is my question. Why didn't he blow up their heads? Now, Jim's theory, and I love Jim because I think he can look at this without, the heavy weight of all the comic movie and comic crap, right? So Jim's theory is that because they were all bathed in the same, energy, maybe that makes them resistant to his ability to do that.
Wow, that'd be great if they explained that.
I would
right.
Even they didn't even have to do a big job of explaining it. If they all are standing in front of him and he just does this moment where he concentrates for a moment and then looks alarmed. You don't have to have him say, "I tried to use my powers and didn't work." Give me that half a second where it's just hey, this guy just realized he's going to have to try different tactics, and I'm sold. But we didn't get that at all.
No. Oh, I agree, and I think it's beautiful. I love that idea, and that totally answers it for me. If there was some kind of recognition of that, otherwise I'm just why? Why the hell is he not doing that?
I assume that he just remembered that he doesn't have the power to explode people's heads, and from that point on, he acted more like Dr. Doom in the comics.
Yeah, it's oh shit, I can't do that. Oh, magic.
It's frustrating So Dr. Doom is one of my absolute favorite comic book villains, and a little bit of this, I'm definitely pulling in some comic fandom. It's in some cases it's a little bit hard to distance yourself from the character, but this is a dude who is regal. This is a guy who commands power whenever he's around, whether he's ruling his own country or whether he's inventing these amazing technological marvels. Even in the comics, he's a motherfucking wizard. This is a guy who he takes anything that he wants to do, and he does it better than anybody else. He is amazing. And I feel like what we got here was a guy who, the hacker thing, they went a completely different angle, but at least we could tell, and while I wasn't 100% on board with that because we lost the regality, we at least still got a character who felt extremely capable. But once we got to that last portion of it, where it's just I'm a guy who has random powers for the sake of random powers, and my goal is I just want to destroy shit for the sake of destroying shit, he became indistinguishable from almost any other generic movie villain, superhero or not.
Well, and speaking of generic movie, this is the fifth movie this year with the subplot of villain tries to destroy the world by sucking everything through a portal. You know what I mean? How many times have we seen this plot in the last year already? I'm couldn't he have done something else? I mean, I totally felt like I was watching Big Hero 6 all over again.
That's a great point. I mean, even the visuals of the giant chunk of Earth being, missing from the, from the mountainside, Area 57 being sucked into another dimension, it kind of looked like the end of Age of Ultron, where the giant chunk of land's now flying above the sky, flying over the Earth, and here's this big gap in the middle of mountains and trees. And here it is again in Fantastic Four, and the same thing. You've got the Big Hero 6 angle, everything's being sucked into this transdimensional portal, and just is atomized or whatever, lost for good. Yeah, okay, yeah. Why? Where's the why? There's no why there. It's the disconnect from this hacktivist character that is kind of rewritten, but not really. He could be noble if his goals were noble, kind of thing. He didn't have to be the prince of a country, but they had to throw that in there. He disappears for about 30 minutes. Comes back, super powerful, blows up heads, wants to destroy the Earth, and is defeated by the power of friendship that never existed. It was just hey, we're friends now, sure, okay. I was sad. It made me really sad, and that whole last 5 minutes where they're like being cute and trying to come up with a name, and
God.
I was just like, this is, and I'm not the first person to say this, but it was unearned. That whole designation of we're the Fantastic Four, we're a family, unearned. You had none of that, and if they had just, went back, never had that 1 year later, had actually had something in that 1 year where you could see Sue and Ben interacting, where you could see Johnny becoming jaded and whatever,
right?
And see Reed, struggling really hard with the fact that he abandoned his friends and he wants to fix things and he's not sure how, and he's scared and mutated and looks, his arms are all over the crazy place. I think we would have ended up with not a great film, maybe not even a good film, but an acceptable movie that didn't end
right
like this. I'm so sad. I don't want to see a sequel. I don't want to see these actors in that role anymore. And I think generally, I think they did a pretty good job on screen. I think they would have chemistry if it was written better, but I don't want to see them in another Fantastic Four. I want them to cut their losses, either give the franchise back to Marvel and Disney, which I don't think they will.
No, they won't. They're not Sony. Fox is digging their heels in.
Yeah, I want them to just say, like, forget it. We tried. Roger Corman had a better go of it. We'll start over. We'll do something different. It won't be an origin story, but it won't be this. It'll be an established family. It'll be, super science, going out into the universe, doing something crazy, and maybe we'll have some X-Men cosmic enemies like the Shi'ar or the Brood, or have Wolverine show up. I don't know. Like, they have so many potential things they could do.
There's lots of things they could do, but I gotta tell you, as the average moviegoer who likes comic book movies, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out at this point. I'm just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, and I'm not even a fan of Fantastic Four, so I'm not the best person to ask about this. I would have been happy to never, ever see a Fantastic Four movie after the Rise of the Silver Surfer. I would have been like, fine, who cares? Bring in the characters sometime, whatever, but no more movies. This one, pretty much, it's sad because I really was rooting for it. I wanted it to fulfill its potential, and now I don't want to see anymore.
As a fan of the Fantastic Four, I don't want to see anymore. I'm out on Fantastic Four movies for a bit. It is disappointing that the best Fantastic Four movie, at least for me, was the Roger Corman one that was only made to hold licensing and wasn't actually wasn't actually released. It is fucking criminal that you can't turn this into an actual realistic franchise, especially when, and Brad, you hit on this point early. A lot of times I hate coming into these, and I do it anyways, and trying to fix the script, because there's a lot of things that go into it, and it's not my job to fix the script. It's the job of the people behind the camera, the writers, the director, everyone, to get something presentable on screen. But there's so much they could have done that is so easy. We talked about Doom, and we needed that area of regality. We have this 1 year, and he's a hacktivist. Why not, instead of leaving him in this other dimension for a year, have him take over a small fucking country in this year, and and instead of I'm trying to destroy everything, just I'm trying to use all of my intellect and my powers to build up this power base, and now you've got the military and the Fantastic Four saying, hey, let's try to stop that, and that becomes your your finale. It becomes you'd have to then plot all that out, but that's, at least in my brain, much better than what we just saw.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we didn't get the movie we deserved. We got the movie that we needed. That we need. I don't even know. Whatever.
We're being punished.
We got the movie that we need to poop on.
I don't know.
That's a different Mobley hashtag.
I didn't feel the need. I didn't feel the need to poop on it. It just kind of happened. So
my favorite review of this that was negative was the person that called it a unmitigated garbage fire. I thought once I saw that as a headline, I was like, I have to see this.
Oh gosh!
But it's not even a fun bad movie, and that's why, if it had been a mediocre disappointment, where like it built up to Explorers and then just kind of was like, fizzle, 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 predictable.
No.
I would have been, okay, fine, maybe they can do better next time, or hey, maybe it'll play better on like at home, like I'll watch it on DVD or Blu-ray or something, and it might have some commentary that makes it good. This is, it's not even Santa Claus versus Conquers the Martians kind of bad, where you can watch it and laugh and have a drinking game or whatever. This is just, I've seen it, I don't want to see it again, I don't want to see anything about it again. Just, that's it.
It also commits the cardinal sin of showing us the Thing with no pants and answering the question of what the Thing's junk looks like. I mean, there was that kind of famous joke in kind of in comic book fandom for years, but Mallrats, we saw it on screen, like, does the Thing have a rocky dork? And the answer is no, he's got this little rocky nubbin and these rocky ass cheeks. It's like...
Maybe he just wasn't excited enough.
Maybe not. Yeah.
He's rocky head big. He's head big. He's got an angry inch.
Maybe he hides it under a rock. Maybe the rock pulls aside, and it's
It's shaped like a dog's dick, is what you're saying.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Like the Thing's red rocket flying out in the middle. So that's the thing. Like, whenever he was on screen and naked, it was distracting for me. Not because it was just like it was an interesting visual or anything like that, because I kept thinking like, fuck are his pants? Give him some pants. Come on, military, just put something on him. Like, if the Hulk can grow to like 8 times his size and keep his purple shorts on, the Thing can have some special pants on. I don't know. That's my last point. I know we've gone long, but I just can't believe they didn't put fucking pants on the Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that's the thing you're worried most about, Will, that says something about this movie.
Apparently.
All right. Well, guys, let's move on to some plugs as we look to wrap for the week. This is the fun part of the show where you tell everyone out in listener land how to find your amazing podcast online, how to find any personal projects you're working on, or movies you think people should see, whatever that might be. Matt, why don't you kick us off?
So I appear on the Comic Book Bears podcast with my co-host Steve, and you can find us on Facebook and on the Earth 2 network. And the other project I'm working on right now is the graphic novel for Bear City 2.5 for the release of Bear City 3. And I'm going to be busy drawing Bears, Bears, Bears for the next, 6 months. So.
Yay! That's awesome. Absolutely. And big congrats to Doug Langway and the guys. The Indiegogo campaign recently finished up, and they are moving ahead with the movie, which is super, super exciting. Very glad to see that. So congrats. Can't wait to get our copy of the graphic novel, Matt. Very much looking forward to that for sure. Huzzah. Steve, what about you?
Well, again, I do appear with Matt and Bill and Justin and Brian every other week on the Comic Book Bears podcast. And I did want to have a quick plug on something that's more documentary-based, because I think you guys, the past couple of weeks, have been watching a lot of documentaries. It's a British series. It's kind of similar to the PBS POV series, where they take sort of like an aspect of history or culture, and they just kind of have an hour show around it. It's called Time Shift. It's not available on TV here. It's not available on DVD, but it is available on the BBC iPlayer or on YouTube. Almost all of them are available on YouTube to watch. It's all based around cultural and social history of the UK, but a lot of it does ring true for Americans, Canadians, anybody who likes a lot of the subjects they talk about, and they go from anywhere from the golden age of professional wrestling, which apparently was very popular in the 60s, to hairdos in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, to something as banal as one that I watched tonight about the rise of bingo. And it's just topics for everybody. Some of it sounds ridiculous, but it's all really good and fascinating. Time Shift, if you have a chance to look for it.
Sweet. Definitely sounds interesting, for sure. Well, unfortunately, we lost Jim a few minutes ago. His connection went down, and he's not able to get back into our Hangout Hollywood single tier, right? So I'm going to give a plug for both Jim and I, and Listener Land. Jim had fun hanging out with you this week until the internet destroyed his connection. So please send him lots of love on Facebook. But we saw a movie yesterday called The Gift that we really, really enjoyed. Stars Jason Bateman, Rebecca Hall, and Joel Edgerton. Basically, it's kind of a thriller movie where Jason Bateman was kind of a dick in school, maybe. He moves back, and this guy that he maybe knows in high school, maybe doesn't, we don't quite know, wants to like be his friend, and ends up like showing up at his house and leaving gifts on the doorstep, and it's all in the trailer, so that's not a spoiler. And it becomes kind of like a it's not a horror movie. Will, you saw it today. I wouldn't really call it a horror movie. This is more of a suspense.
Psychological thriller.
Yeah, definitely a psychological thriller. Really, really good. I really haven't been entertained by a psychological thriller like that in a really long time. Plus, Jason Bateman has a beard in this movie and is looking super fucking hot. Excuse my language, sorry. Anyway, I like guys of all types, and Jason Bateman totally did it for me in this movie. Joel Edgerton with a beard, not so much. It was a little weird not seeing him in like his Ramses like guy liner from Exodus of Gods and Kings, but they all three did really phenomenally well in this movie, I thought. So definitely go check it out while it's in theaters. And Will, what about you?
Yeah, I'd like to plug this movie called The Gift. I'm just going to piggyback on yours very briefly. Yeah, if you're anything like me, you were really sorely disappointed this weekend having seen the Fantastic Four. The Gift is great for washing that very sour taste out of your mouth. Really cool psychological thriller, very taut, and all of the three main leads in this, Jason Bateman, Rebecca Hall, and Joel Edgerton, are all fantastic. Like, this is the trailers for this have been extremely underwhelming, for me at least. I almost passed it on it entirely, but no, go watch this movie. It's quite good.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, Matt and Steve, it has been a total pleasure having you guys join us this week.
Oh, yeah.
We definitely want to send a shout out to Bill and Brian. We love having you guys on the show. Again, doesn't have to be a comic book movie. If there's a movie coming out you just want to talk about, let us know. Happy to have you guys. But thank you for joining us. Those of you out in listener land who have been hanging out with us live, always happy to have you as well, especially when you said hunky shirtless pics, being all furry and eating ice cream and awesome. But yeah, and if you're listening to us in digital tape delay in iTunes or Stitcher, fret not. Even though you missed the awesomeness of Paul's picture that he submitted, you can find the episode on YouTube and skip to that part of the show, and you can see what you missed because it was pretty good. Anyway, all right, everyone. I have no idea what we're doing next week. Man from Uncle? I don't know. We'll have to figure something out, Will.
I don't know.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time we talk some classic movies. It's been a while. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll see. But have a great week, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.